The first time I saw my husband holding another woman, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even move. I simply stood outside a bedroom window in the cold evening air, watching the man I had loved for 11 years smile in a way I had almost forgotten existed. His arms were wrapped around her waist. She was wearing a deep red dress, and she was laughing against his chest, as though she belonged there. For 11 years, my husband, Daniel, had told me that the first week of August belonged to his family. Every year, without exception, he packed one small suitcase, kissed me goodbye, and drove nearly 4 hours south. Just family stuff, he always said. I never questioned him. Until that year. Until I followed him. And what I discovered behind that window would force me to question not only my marriage, but whether I had ever truly known the man sleeping beside me. There are secrets people keep because they are ashamed. There are secrets people keep because they are afraid. And then there are secrets people keep because they believe the truth would destroy everything they have built. Daniel's secret belonged to the third kind. At least, that was what I would eventually understand. But on that August evening, all I knew was that my husband was holding another woman, and every innocent explanation I had ever given him suddenly sounded ridiculous. My name is Elise. I was 38 years old when I followed my husband for the first time. I worked as a project coordinator for a construction company in Charlotte, and Daniel was a civil engineer who spent most of his days moving between job sites. We weren't rich. We weren't struggling either. We had a comfortable little house, 2 cars, a mortgage that behaved like it personally hated us, and a kitchen table where we had eaten thousands of meals together. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but I thought it was honest. Daniel was the quiet one. I was the talker. He liked his coffee black. I liked mine with enough cream to make it resemble dessert. He folded his shirts with military precision. I threw mine over the bedroom chair and promised myself I'd deal with them later. And every Sunday morning, no matter how busy the week had been, Daniel made pancakes. Not because I asked. Not because his mother had taught him. She used to say a man who can make breakfast can survive anything, he once told me. I laughed. You've been making pancakes for 11 years. How's survival going? He kissed my forehead. I'm still here. I remember that conversation, because later, when everything changed, those words came back to me. I'm still here. At the time, I thought he meant our marriage. I didn't know he was talking about something else. Whew. The first week of August had always been strange. Daniel became distracted a few days before it began. He checked his phone more often. He became quieter at dinner. He would stand at the kitchen window after washing the dishes, staring into the backyard as though his mind were somewhere else. And then, on the first Saturday of August, he packed. Always the same thing. 5 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, a black sweater, running shoes, toiletries, and an old brown leather notebook that I had never seen him use anywhere else. That notebook bothered me. Not because of what was inside, because of how carefully he protected it. Once, I reached for it while cleaning the bedroom. Daniel appeared behind me so quickly that I actually jumped. Don't touch that. His voice wasn't angry. It was frightened. I slowly turned around. I was just moving it. He took the notebook from my hand. Sorry. Then he smiled. But the smile didn't reach his eyes. It's just personal. I nodded. Okay. I didn't ask again. That was how our marriage worked. We gave each other space. We trusted each other. At least, I thought we did. Tuck. The first time I asked about his family, Daniel told me they lived in a small town called Belmere. I'd never heard of it. Where exactly? About 4 hours from here. 4 hours? Yeah. Why have I never met them? He paused. They're complicated. That was all. I assumed he meant the usual family complications. Divorces. Old arguments. People who stopped speaking to each other over money. I understood. My own family had enough drama to fill 3 television seasons. So I didn't push. Years passed. Every August, Daniel went to Belmere. Every August, I stayed home. And every August, he returned different. Not happier, not sadder, just lighter. like a weight had been removed from his shoulders. One year, I asked him about it. What do you actually do there? He smiled. Nothing special. You disappear for 7 days. It's family. That's not an answer. He laughed. You worry too much. Maybe I did. But there was something about his face whenever he said the word family. Something I couldn't explain. He didn't say it like a man talking about relatives. He said it like a man talking about a responsibility. The year I followed him began like every other. Except I had started noticing little things. Daniel received a message at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. I was half asleep when his phone vibrated on the nightstand. He looked at the screen. His expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. His eyebrows tightened. His mouth went still. Then he typed a reply and placed the phone face down. Who was that? I asked, sleepily. Nobody. I opened my eyes. Nobody has a name? He laughed softly. It's family. Again. That word. Family. I turned over. But I didn't sleep. The next morning, I asked him if everything was okay. He said yes. I believed him. Until 3 days later, when I found the receipt. It was tucked inside the pocket of his work jacket. A hotel in Belmere. 1 night. 2 guests. I stared at the paper for almost a minute. Then I noticed something else. The reservation wasn't for the week. It was for 1 night. Saturday. The same Saturday he always told me he was leaving. Why would he book a hotel if he stayed with family? I confronted him that evening. Daniel looked at the receipt, then at me. It's nothing. My stomach tightened. Nothing? Sometimes I stay there. You've never told me that. I didn't think it mattered. I laughed once. It wasn't a happy laugh. You don't think where you sleep matters to your wife? He sighed. Elise? No. Explain it. He looked exhausted. Not guilty. Exhausted. And somehow that made me angrier. You've been doing this for years, I said. Every August, you disappear for a week. You barely tell me anything, and now I find a hotel receipt for 2 people. His eyes shifted away. That was the moment something inside me cracked. Because guilty people usually defend themselves. Daniel didn't. He simply said, Please trust me. I stared at him. I have been. He lowered his head. I know. Then give me a reason to. Silence. Finally, he said, I can't. That sentence followed me for days. I didn't decide to follow him because I wanted revenge. I followed him because I was terrified. There is a difference. People like to imagine betrayal begins with anger. Sometimes it begins with fear. The fear that the person you built your entire adult life around has another life you know nothing about. The fear that everyone else knows. The fear that you might be the last person to understand what is happening inside your own marriage. On the morning Daniel left, I kissed him at the front door. Drive safe. He smiled. I will. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. Then he walked to his car. I stood there watching until the vehicle disappeared around the corner. Then I went inside. For 20 minutes, I sat on the edge of the bed. I almost talked myself out of it. Then I remembered his words. I can't. I grabbed my keys. I kept far enough behind him that he wouldn't notice. Charlotte disappeared behind us. Then the highway. Then smaller roads. The trees became thicker. The houses became older. The world seemed to slow down. After nearly 4 hours, Daniel turned onto a quiet street lined with tall oak trees. Belmere. He drove past several houses before turning into a narrow driveway. I parked farther away. Then I watched. A woman came out of the house. She was beautiful. Not in the polished, artificial way people sometimes look beautiful in photographs. She had the kind of face that looked alive. Long, dark hair, warm brown skin, a deep red dress, bare feet. She walked toward Daniel with a smile. He got out of the car. For a second, they simply looked at each other. Then she ran into his arms. Daniel held her tightly. I felt something cold move through my chest. I didn't need more evidence. At least, that's what I thought. The woman pulled back and touched his face. Daniel laughed. A genuine laugh. The kind I hadn't heard in months. Then she hugged him again. I sat behind the steering wheel with both hands gripping it. My mind started filling in the blanks. Every August. The secret notebook. The hotel. The late-night messages. The unexplained phone calls. The woman. Everything suddenly had an explanation, and every explanation hurt. I wanted to drive away. I wanted to confront him. I wanted to call him and ask one simple question. Who is she? Instead, I waited. Because some part of me knew that if I confronted him immediately, he would give me a version of the truth. I wanted to see the whole truth first. So I waited until evening. To Daniel. Stayed at the house all afternoon. I watched from a distance. At one point, an older man arrived. Then a teenage boy. They all went inside. Nobody looked suspicious. Nobody behaved like criminals. Nobody looked like people hiding an affair. And somehow, that made everything more confusing. At around 7:30, the lights inside the house came on. I moved closer. Not close enough to be seen. There was a large window facing the driveway. The curtains were partly open. I could see the living room. Daniel was sitting on the couch. The woman in the red dress was standing beside him. They were talking. Then she laughed. Daniel stood. He walked toward her, and then he wrapped his arms around her. She leaned into him. My heart sank. I raised my phone. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted proof. Maybe I wanted something tangible, because my mind refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. I took a photograph through the glass. The picture came out blurry, but it was clear enough. Daniel, the woman, his arms around her, a life I knew nothing about. I lowered my phone. And then the woman said something that made Daniel freeze. Even through the glass, I could see his expression change. She reached toward the table, picked up something, and handed it to him. A photograph. Daniel stared at it for several seconds. Then he sat down. The woman sat beside him. She touched his shoulder. He looked like a man remembering something painful. I couldn't hear them. But I could see the emotion. This wasn't romance. At least, it didn't look like romance anymore. It looked like grief. I stayed there until almost midnight. At 12:14 a.m., Daniel finally stepped outside. I ducked behind my car. He stood on the porch alone. The woman followed him. They spoke quietly. Then she touched his arm. Daniel nodded. She went back inside. He remained outside for several minutes. Then he pulled the brown leather notebook from his jacket. He opened it. I watched him turn several pages. Then he stopped. He took a pen from his pocket and wrote something. I couldn't see what. But when he closed the notebook, he pressed his palm against its cover, like he was saying goodbye to something, or someone. Then he looked toward the house and whispered, "I promised you." I couldn't hear the rest, but those 3 words were enough to change the way I felt. A promise. To whom? And why did it require 7 days every year? Soft. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't leaving Belmere until I knew the truth. At breakfast, I watched Daniel through the window. The woman was in the kitchen. The teenage boy sat across from Daniel. The older man was reading a newspaper. It looked almost ordinary. Too ordinary. Then the boy said something. Daniel suddenly became serious. The woman placed her hand over the boy's. The boy looked down. Daniel leaned forward. Whatever they were discussing, it mattered. Then the teenage boy stood up and walked out of the room. The woman began crying. Daniel stood and hugged her. This time, there was no doubt. It wasn't the embrace of lovers. It was the embrace of people carrying the same wound. But that raised an even bigger question. What wound? Around noon, I finally met someone who knew. I was sitting alone at a small cafe near the town square when an elderly woman behind the counter looked at me strangely. "You're Daniel's wife." I nearly dropped my coffee. "How do you know?" She smiled. "Belmere remembers people." I didn't know what to say. She wiped the counter. "He said you might come one day." My heart stopped. "He said what?" The woman looked toward the window. Daniel always knew this day might come. I leaned forward. "What exactly did he tell you?" She studied my face. Then she sighed. "Not enough." My voice became quieter. "Please." She looked uncomfortable. This isn't my story to tell. Then whose is it? She hesitated. His. I stood. Where is he? At the house. What house? She looked directly into my eyes. The house where his first family died. Everything inside me went still. What? She shook her head. I shouldn't have said that. I felt my pulse pounding. His first family? She turned away, but I couldn't let it go. Who died? She didn't answer. Please. Finally, she whispered, his parents. I swallowed. And? Her eyes filled with sadness. His little sister. I couldn't breathe. Daniel had told me his parents died years ago. He had never mentioned a sister. Not once. Not in 11 years. I walked outside the cafe feeling like the entire town had shifted beneath my feet. His parents. A sister. A house. A promise. A week every August. And a woman in a red dress who seemed to know all of it. That evening, I returned to the house. This time, I didn't hide. I stood across the street and watched. Daniel came outside. He looked directly at me. Our eyes met. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look angry. He looked heartbroken. He slowly walked toward me. I crossed my arms. Who is she? Daniel stopped several feet away. He didn't answer. Who is that woman? His eyes dropped. Elise. Don't. My voice shook. Don't say my name like that. Not tonight. He took a breath. I wanted to tell you. When? He said nothing. After 11 more years? He closed his eyes. I was trying to protect you. I laughed bitterly. From what? He looked toward the house. From the truth. I felt tears burning my eyes. You lied to me. Yes. The honesty stunned me. No excuse. No denial. Just yes. I stepped closer. Are you in love with her? Daniel looked at me. No. Then why have you been coming here every August? His jaw tightened. Because I owe them my life. I didn't understand. What does that mean? He looked back at the house, then at me. The woman you saw isn't my lover. Then who is she? Daniel's eyes filled with tears. She is the reason I'm alive. I stood completely still. He continued. 23 years ago, before I met you, my family was destroyed in a fire. I stared at him. My parents died that night. He swallowed. My sister was 14. His voice broke. She didn't make it out. I felt my anger begin to collapse beneath the weight of his words, but I still didn't understand. What does that woman have to do with it? Daniel looked at the house. She was there that night. My heart pounded. She saw everything. Who is she? Daniel took one step toward me. And then he said something I was not prepared to hear. She was the one who started the fire. My mouth fell open. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Daniel added, and the boy inside that house. He looked toward the teenage boy standing behind the window. Is her son. I stared at the window. The boy was watching us, and suddenly I understood why Daniel had been coming here every August. But I still didn't understand the most important part. Why would the man whose family died in that fire spend 1 week every year caring for the woman responsible? Daniel reached into his jacket. He pulled out the brown leather notebook. Then he handed it to me. I need you to read this. I looked at the notebook. What is it? His voice was barely above a whisper. The reason I married you without ever telling you the whole truth. I opened the cover. The first page contained a date. August 17th, 2003. Underneath it were 6 words written in Daniel's handwriting. I promised her I would never forget. I turned the page. And what I read next made me realize that the woman in the red dress wasn't the only person Daniel had been protecting. There was another name, a name I recognized, a name that had been buried in my own family's history. And suddenly, I wasn't sure whether I had followed my husband to uncover his secret, or whether his secret had been waiting for me all along. I stared at the name in Daniel's notebook until the letters began to blur. Thomas Reed, my father. For several seconds, I couldn't move. My father had been dead for 6 years. Daniel knew that. He had stood beside me at the funeral. He had held my hand when I couldn't stop crying. He had helped me clean out my father's workshop afterward, and yet his name was sitting inside a notebook connected to a fire that had happened 23 years earlier. A fire that had killed Daniel's parents. A fire that had killed his 14-year-old sister. A fire that, according to Daniel, had been started by the woman living inside that house. My father was somehow connected to all of it. I looked up. Why is my father's name in here? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked older than he had that morning. Not physically, emotionally. Like a man who had finally reached the moment he'd spent years trying to avoid. Because your father was there that night, he said. My chest tightened. No. I saw him. No. Elise, my father wasn't there. You weren't. You don't know him. I knew him before you ever met me. That sentence hurt more than I expected. I stepped backward. Daniel reached toward me. I moved away. Don't. He stopped. I looked down at the notebook again. Tell me everything. Daniel nodded. But before he spoke, the woman in the red dress stepped onto the porch. Her face was pale. She had heard enough. She walked toward us slowly. It's time, she said. Daniel looked at her. She looked at me. My name is Mara. I already knew her name was not the important part. I wanted the truth. Mara took a shaky breath. Your father didn't start the fire. I looked at Daniel. Then who did? Mara's eyes filled with tears. I did. 23 years earlier, Mara had been 19. She had lived in Belmere with her younger brother. She was working 2 jobs and trying to save enough money to leave town. Then she met Daniel's older cousin, Michael. Michael was charming, funny, careless, and, according to Mara, dangerous when angry. They had been together for several months. One night, they argued. Mara had discovered that Michael was stealing money from people who trusted him. She threatened to expose him. He threatened her. The argument became physical. Mara ran. She ended up near the Reed family home. Daniel's father, Robert, saw her outside and brought her in. He gave her water. He told her she could stay until things calmed down, but Michael followed her. That night, something went terribly wrong. A lantern was knocked over. Curtains caught fire. The flames spread faster than anyone expected. Robert tried to get his wife and daughter out. Mara escaped through a side door. Daniel, who was 13 at the time, was sleeping upstairs. His father went back inside for him. He never came out. Neither did Daniel's mother. Neither did his sister. Daniel survived only because his sister had pushed him toward a bedroom window when the smoke became too thick. He fell from the 2nd floor. He survived with a broken leg and burns along his left shoulder. His sister didn't. Mara spent the next several years carrying a guilt she believed would eventually destroy her. But that wasn't the whole story. Because when investigators arrived, someone had already changed the evidence. The fallen lantern was gone, the damaged curtains had disappeared, and the report blamed faulty electrical wiring. The case was closed. No one was charged. Mara believed she had accidentally caused the deaths. Daniel believed the official story. Until years later, he discovered something in his father's old records. Something that changed everything. Your father found out, Daniel told me. I stared at him. Found out what? That the fire wasn't an accident. My mind raced. My father? Daniel nodded. He was working as an insurance investigator at the time. I had never known that. My father had always told me he worked in property management. Apparently, that wasn't the whole truth either. Daniel opened the notebook and turned several pages. Inside were photocopies, photographs, old newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, dates, names, phone numbers, and one photograph of my father standing beside the burned remains of the Reed family home. I touched the photograph with trembling fingers. He investigated the fire? Yes. Why didn't he tell me? Because he discovered something terrifying. Daniel pointed to one of the pages. The electrical fault was fabricated. I looked at the writing. By whom? Daniel looked at Mara. Mara lowered her head. Then Daniel said, by the insurance company. I felt a strange chill. They wanted to avoid paying the claim. Daniel explained that the Reed family had recently taken out a large life insurance policy. The company suspected fraud. Instead of investigating honestly, a senior investigator manipulated the evidence. But there was more. Someone inside the company had pressured witnesses. Someone had threatened Mara. Someone had even paid Michael to disappear. My father had uncovered enough evidence to prove the fire had been deliberately misclassified. But before he could expose the truth, his own employer threatened him. His career was destroyed. His reputation was attacked, and he was told to leave the case alone. My father refused, so they took another route. They told him that if he continued, they would make sure his family suffered. My mother was pregnant with me at the time. My father stopped investigating, but he didn't forget. He kept copies of everything, and years later, those documents somehow found their way to Daniel. I looked at him. How? My father had a friend. Who? Your father. I shook my head. This makes no sense. Daniel nodded. I know. He turned another page. This is why I didn't tell you. Because you thought I'd be angry? No. Then why? Because I didn't know how to tell you that your father spent years trying to uncover the truth about my family. He paused, and because I was afraid you'd blame yourself for something that wasn't yours. I felt tears slide down my face. My father never said anything. He wanted to protect you. I looked toward Mara. And she? Mara stepped closer. I have spent 23 years believing I killed his family. Her voice trembled. I didn't know the fire was deliberately covered up until Daniel found me. I looked at her. Why would Daniel find you? Because your father left him a letter. Daniel opened the notebook to the final section. The handwriting was not his. It was my father's. I recognized it immediately. The slightly slanted letters, the heavy pressure on the capital T, the way he crossed his T's. My knees almost gave out. Daniel handed me the page. I read. Daniel, if you're reading this, then I wasn't able to finish what I started. There is one person you must find. Her name is Mara Ellis. She believes she caused the fire. She didn't. Tell her the truth. And if my daughter ever learns about this, don't let her carry my burden. I stopped reading. The room became silent. Then I saw the final sentence. She has spent enough of her life believing people are always what they appear to be. I lowered the paper. That sounds like my father. Daniel gave a sad smile. It is. Oh. I spent that night in a small hotel in Belmere. Not with Daniel. Alone. I needed space. Not because I hated him. Because suddenly, I didn't know which parts of my life were mine and which parts had been built around secrets. I sat beside the hotel window until nearly 3 a.m. Outside, Belmere was quiet. A train passed in the distance. Somewhere, a dog barked, and I kept thinking about one question. Why had Daniel never told me? The easy answer was that he wanted to protect me. But marriage isn't supposed to be built on protection through silence. It's supposed to be built on trust. At 6 a.m, Daniel knocked on my door. I opened it. He stood there holding 2 cups of coffee. Black for him. Cream for me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I laughed through my tears. You still remembered? He smiled. I remember everything about you. That sentence broke something open inside me. I let him in. We sat on opposite sides of the small hotel table. I asked him the question I had been avoiding. Did you ever love Mara? No. Did you ever have feelings for her? He thought carefully. I felt responsible for her. That's not the same thing. No. He looked at me. She became the only person alive who remembered my sister the way I did. I understood. That was the part I had missed. Daniel hadn't spent those August weeks visiting another woman. He had been visiting the last living witness to his family's tragedy. And the boy in the house? His name was Jonah, Mara's son. He had been born years after the fire. Daniel had helped raise him because Jonah's father had abandoned them. Every August, Daniel returned to Belmere to spend time with Mara and Jonah. Not because they were his family by blood, because they had become his family through survival. And there was one more reason. Daniel had made a promise to his sister. Daniel's sister had been 14 when she died. Her name was Sophie. Before the fire, She had been obsessed with astronomy. She kept a notebook filled with drawings of planets and stars. On the night of the fire, when Daniel was trapped upstairs, Sophie had pushed him through the bedroom window. Before she disappeared into the smoke, she told him, "Don't let them forget me." Daniel had survived, but he carried those words for 23 years. Every August, he returned to Belmere. He visited the small memorial stone behind the house. He brought flowers. He read Sophie's old notebook, and he told her what had happened in the world since she died. He told her about meeting me. Our wedding, our first apartment, our stupid arguments, the promotion he got, the car we bought, the dog we never ended up getting. He told her everything. It wasn't about guilt anymore. It was remembrance. He didn't want Sophie to become just a name on a stone. And now I understood the sentence in the notebook. I promised her I would never forget. I had spent years believing my husband was leaving me every August. The truth was that he was keeping someone else from disappearing. But there was still one problem: the insurance company. The people responsible for burying the truth were still alive, and one of them was now a respected businessman in Belmere. His name was Victor Hale. I knew the name. Everyone did. Victor owned several properties around town. He funded a local scholarship. His photograph appeared in newspapers. He was the kind of man people described as a pillar of the community. But my father had spent years collecting evidence against him. Daniel believed Victor was the person who ordered the original cover-up. And now, after 23 years, Daniel had finally found something that could prove it. A former employee had contacted him. She had kept a copy of an internal insurance memo. The memo contained a sentence that changed everything. Suppress the original findings. The Reed claim must remain classified as accidental. Below it was Victor Hale's signature. Daniel had been preparing to expose him. That was why his trips had become more secretive. That was why he had been meeting Mara. That was why he had kept the notebook. And that was why he had been afraid to tell me. Because Victor was still powerful. Soft. A week after I followed Daniel, we returned home together. But things weren't the same. We didn't pretend they were. We sat at our kitchen table and talked for hours. About trust. About silence. About the ways people can love each other and still hurt each other. Daniel apologized. Not once. Several times. He admitted that he should have told me years earlier. He admitted that hiding the truth had been unfair. And I admitted something too. I had spent years assuming that because Daniel loved me, he would never keep anything important from me. That wasn't realistic. People don't always hide things because they don't love you. Sometimes they hide things because they are afraid of what the truth might cost. But fear doesn't make secrecy harmless. We both had to learn that. 3 days later, Daniel placed the notebook on the table. We have a choice. What choice? We can leave it buried. I looked at him. Or, we tell the truth. I thought about my father, about Sophie, about Mara, about Jonah. Then I nodded. Tell the truth. Soph. The investigation reopened quietly. Daniel contacted a lawyer. Mara agreed to testify. The former insurance employee gave them the original memo. My father's records were authenticated. And then, something unexpected happened. Victor Hale tried to settle. He offered money. A lot of it. Enough to change our lives. Daniel refused. Mara refused. I refused. Because by then, it wasn't about money. It was about names. People deserved to know what happened. The Reed family deserved to stop being remembered as victims of an electrical accident. Sophie deserved to be remembered as the girl who saved her brother. Mara deserved to stop carrying guilt that didn't belong entirely to her. And my father deserved to have his work recognized. The case eventually became public. Victor's company faced investigations. Former employees came forward. Documents were uncovered. And the truth finally emerged. The fire had been deliberately misclassified. Evidence had been suppressed. Witnesses had been pressured. And my father had spent years trying to correct the lie. He never got to see it happen. But his daughter did. Chipre. Months later, I returned to Belmere. This time, I didn't follow Daniel. He asked me to come. There was a small memorial ceremony for Sophie. Mara stood beside me. Jonah stood behind us. Daniel carried flowers. We walked toward the memorial stone together. For the first time, I understood why he came every August. He wasn't running away from our marriage. He was returning to a part of himself that had been left behind. Daniel placed the flowers beside Sophie's name. Then he looked at me. I should have brought you here years ago. I smiled sadly. Yes. I was scared. I know. I thought if you knew everything, you'd see me differently. I do. He looked nervous. I reached for his hand. I see you more clearly now. He squeezed my fingers. We stood together in silence. Then Mara approached the stone. She placed a small photograph beside the flowers. It was Sophie, 14 years old, smiling. Alive in the only way photographs can keep someone alive. Mara began to cry. I've carried this for 23 years, she whispered. Daniel put his hand on her shoulder. You don't have to anymore. She nodded. And for the first time, I saw something leave her face. Not sadness, not guilt. Wait. Thunlock. That night, Daniel and I stayed in Belmere. We walked through the old neighborhood. The house where the fire happened had been demolished years earlier. A new home stood there now. But the oak tree remained. Daniel stopped beneath it. This was where Sophie used to sit. I looked up. She'd read here? Every afternoon. What did she want to become? He smiled. A scientist. Did she ever tell you? Every day. I laughed softly. Sounds like she was determined. She was. We stood beneath the branches. Then Daniel said something that surprised me. I thought keeping her memory alive meant returning here every year. What do you think now? He looked at me. I think keeping her memory alive means living. I smiled. He continued. She would hate seeing me spend the rest of my life trapped in that night. I took his hand. Then don't. He nodded, and we walked away from the tree together. Our marriage didn't magically become perfect after that. Real marriages don't work like movies. We still argued. Daniel still left his socks beside the bed. I still abandoned clothes on the chair. He still drank coffee that tasted like burnt tires. I still put enough cream in mine to offend coffee lovers everywhere. But something had changed. We talked. Really talked. When something frightened us, we said it. When something hurt, we didn't hide it behind silence. And every August, Daniel still returned to Belmere. But now I went with him. Sometimes Mara joined us. Sometimes Jonah did. We ate together. We laughed. We told stories about Sophie. We remembered my father. And every year, Daniel brought the same brown notebook, but he no longer kept it locked away. One August afternoon, he handed it to me. Finish the last page. I looked at him. What should I write? He smiled. Whatever you think Sophie should hear. I opened the notebook. I thought for a moment. Then I wrote, You were not forgotten. Your brother kept his promise. Your story survived the fire. And beneath that, I added one final sentence. So did we. There is something I've learned since that summer. Sometimes we think betrayal is the worst thing someone can do to us. But sometimes the deeper wound is the silence surrounding the truth. Daniel's secret almost destroyed our marriage. Not because he had another woman. He didn't. Not because he had another family. He didn't. It nearly destroyed us because he believed love meant carrying every burden alone. And I believed love meant being trusted with every truth. We were both wrong. Love isn't about knowing everything from the beginning. It's about being brave enough to tell the truth when the truth becomes too heavy to carry alone. That year, I followed my husband because I thought I was going to catch him cheating. Instead, I discovered a dead girl whose memory had shaped his entire life. I discovered a woman who had spent decades blaming herself for something she didn't fully understand. I discovered that my own father had fought a battle I knew nothing about. And most importantly, I discovered that the person I thought I had been chasing was actually the person who had been waiting for me to finally understand him. So if there is one thing I would tell anyone listening to this story, it is this. Don't confuse silence with peace. And don't assume you know the reason behind someone's behavior simply because you've seen only the outside of it. Sometimes the person who looks like they're running away is actually running back to keep a promise. And sometimes the truth doesn't arrive to destroy your life. Sometimes it arrives to finally set everyone free. As for Daniel, he still spends 1 week in Belmere every August. But now, when he packs that old brown notebook, he doesn't leave me behind. I go with him, because some memories are too painful to carry alone, and some stories deserve to be remembered together. If this story made you look differently at the secrets people carry, maybe that's the real lesson. We never truly know what battle someone is fighting behind a closed door. And sometimes, the person standing quietly beside you isn't hiding a second life. They may simply be trying to survive the first one.